Assalamu alaikum, Imran TV viewers. I have with me here Syeikh Imran Husen, who actually needs no introduction. He is a senior scholar of Islam who has pioneered the work on Islamic eschatology. But there is something I would like to say as an introduction to him, which probably no one has mentioned before. I would like to say that Syeikh Imran is a poet. And just recently, in one of his talks titled Islam and Buddhism, Maulana mentioned an interesting three-line poem which I picked up, sounded to me like a haiku poem. He said, "Santa Claus comes on a reindeer from the North Pole with US dollars." So I found that very interesting to introduce Maulana now to you as a scholar who is a poet as well. So Maulana, thank you for allowing this interview. The subject of our interview today is Islamic spirituality and the teacher and the student in the pursuit of spiritual knowledge.
I'm happy, Hasbullah, to have this chance to respond to your questions for the Imran TV, connected with the Tawfiq Center here in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. They have been so kind to invite me on several occasions to the Tawfiq Center, and it is for me a matter of to respond to the questions today, inshallah.
Okay. So Maulana, you have often spoken about Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, and you have written two books at least on the subject, one Surah Al-Kahf and the Modern Age, and In Search of the Footprints of Khidr. But sometimes you also do mention of Maulana Rumi and Shams Tabriz, and whenever you mention their names, I feel kind of excitement in you, but you never actually spoke much about them. So may I request that you speak a little bit about Maulana Rumi and Shams Tabriz?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The pursuit of knowledge in the religion of Islam, and there is only one religion with Allah, and it is the religion of Islam, the same religion which came to Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, Nabi Musa alayhi salam, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, all the prophets of Allah, those whose names are mentioned and those whose names are not mentioned in the Quran, they all have the same religion. And it is a characteristic of the religion of Islam that the pursuit of knowledge is a sacred activity. And the momentous achievement of Dajjal is to secularize what Allah had created to be sacred. And so today we now have this peculiar phenomenon of secular education juxtaposed against sacred education, sacred knowledge. In the pursuit of knowledge, you have the one who is seeking knowledge and the one who is teaching, who has been bestowed knowledge by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first step on the way of the pursuit of knowledge in the teacher-student relationship is that a student must have in his heart a thirst for knowledge. He must be serious about his effort to acquire knowledge. We do not accept part-time education, part-time pursuit of knowledge. It must be a full-time activity, even if you are a medical doctor, you are a businessman, whatever you are constantly with a hunger, with thirst in your heart for knowledge. And that hunger and that thirst for knowledge remains with you all through your life. In the secular world, you do not have a counterpart of that hunger and that thirst for knowledge. Rather, you pursue knowledge so that you can get a degree, you can get a job. Full stop. I can go home and eat my biryani and go to sleep now. The second thing about the pursuit of knowledge is that we recognize that there is a link between knowledge and nur. The knowledge is nur. Yes. Knowledge is nur. And therefore, knowledge has to be approached in a manner which is appropriate for the acquisition of nur. One has to recognize the value of knowledge. One has to show respect for knowledge. One must ensure that one does not misuse knowledge. You do not acquire knowledge to become rich. You do not acquire knowledge so that you can advance in the dunya. You acquire knowledge so that inside of you, you may have nur. You may acquire knowledge so that you might be able to understand the world in which you live. And so there's a world of difference between the one who is pursuing knowledge to get a degree, to get a job, and the one who is pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge and therefore for nur. And then the seeker of knowledge must now search for the teacher. And the religion of Islam has come to us in the Quran tells us that there is a difference in the teacher between that part of history prior to the last age and then Akhir Zaman. That the teacher in Akhir Zaman cannot be the same teacher prior to Akhir Zaman. No. Prior to Akhir Zaman, there is the ordinary teacher. Allah has blessed him with knowledge and he teaches. And mashallah for his effort. But in Akhir Zaman you need more than just the ordinary teacher. In Akhir Zaman you need a khidr to be your teacher. This is knowledge at the highest level. A khidr is someone who not only has knowledge which is externally acquired, but knowledge which is internally received. That Allah says about Khidr, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. But more than that, that these two worlds of knowledge, Majma'ul Bahrain, are harmoniously integrated with each other. So you do not have two worlds of knowledge like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That I studied the Islamic disciplines and I get my graduation here, and I go to the university and I study politics and economics and I get my graduation here. And in the daytime I'm here, and in the nighttime I'm there. I live with my feet in two boats. I'm traveling in two boats. No, we do not want two worlds of knowledge separated from each other. We want the two worlds of knowledge, the one externally acquired and the one internally received, to be harmoniously integrated with each other. And that can only happen with nur, and that nur must be used to study the Quran. And it is the Quran which will integrate the two worlds of knowledge. And therefore the model of the teacher in Akhir Zaman who will satisfy the hunger in the heart of the student is a khidr.
So what do you say, Maulana? Does everyone has a khidr of his own, or do you identify someone to be the khidr of the age?
I do not walk down that road of identifying a Khidr of the age.
Okay.
Nor do I advise anyone to walk down that road. If there is a Khidr of the age, it will be someone that Allah has chosen. And if Allah has chosen someone, then it is for Allah to give us the means to recognize him. So we should not be exercising our powers of discrimination to identify any Khidr of the age. But the student in search of a teacher must look for someone who is like Khidr. And my way of identifying him, that you might recognize him, is to look for his footprints.
Yes.
And that's why I wrote a little booklet in search of Khidr's footprints in Akhir Zaman. He is someone who embodies kindness and compassion. آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا. And he's also someone who's been blessed with knowledge from Allah directly to him. وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا الْعِلْمَ. He's also someone who is very humble. The knowledge which Allah has given to you, I don't have that. And the knowledge that Allah has given to me, you don't have that. And he is the most learned of all men, and yet he speaks like this. Number two, he sits on a rock, not on the shifting sand. So even if with only one solitary voice, and he has no one in the whole world to support him, it doesn't bother him in the least. No.
Sounds familiar.
He does not care two peanuts if others agree with him or don't agree with him, because his focus is on Allah. And if he is confident in his heart that this is the truth that I have located and I am teaching, then he must please Allah. So he proceeds. And if it is the truth, it will survive. That is the nature of truth. It must survive. Nothing can prevent it. They can close the doors of every single masjid in the world on him. It doesn't matter to him. No. They can ban him, they can say what they want. It does not matter to him. Once it is the truth, it will survive and his views will prevail. But if it is not the truth, if he has made a mistake, it'll go on. It'll be forgotten tomorrow. And so this is how you search for your Khidr.
In the book, Maulana, you mentioned when you were 18 years of age, you found your Khidr, referring to Maulana Ansari Rahimahullah. Could you say a little bit about that experience?
In my case, it was different. My Khidr came to me. This is not the normal way. The normal way is you have to go in search of your Khidr. But I was 18 years of age, and my father and my grandfather, I don't know about my great-grandfather, but my father and my grandfather were both had significant commitment to Islam. And therefore I was brought up in a milieu in which I understood the importance of Islam. And the masjid was located just behind our home. So if I want to go to the masjid through the front door, I'll have to come out of the house, walk to the right, and then walk another road to the right, and then enter the masjid. But I could just jump over the wall from my backyard. I'm in the masjid. And because of the proximity of the masjid, and because of my father's commitment to Islam, I was already someone with an attachment to Islam. And then when I was about 13 years of age, my father died when I was 15. when I was about 13 years of age, 3 of our elder youths of the village, they came to my father. My father was a school principal, and he kept his children indoors lock and key. He was very careful who we mixed with. And they asked for permission for me and my brother to join an Islamic youth movement which was being established in our town. And my father gave permission. And so I started attending meetings every Sunday. And this was an exciting part of my life. I'm now introduced to others who were teaching me Islam. Of the 3 of them who were there to talk with my father, 1 has now passed away, but 2 are still alive. 1 is in London and 1 is in Toronto. They're both alive, they're older than me. And so by the time I had reached the age of 18, the Islamic youth movement had already given me some foundation in Islam, and I was one of the vice presidents of the national youth movement for the whole country at the age of 18. And then Maulana Dr. Fazlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah, arrived in Trinidad in 1960, and I was 18 years of age. And there was a lot of excitement. We had no Maulanas in our country. We had a Mulvi or Maulawi, 3 of them, but the term Maulana was not used. And so there was a lot of excitement, and Maulana Ansari had a profile that was already very famous. And he came to my village masjid to lecture on Islam and science. And I was a student. I had just graduated from the best college in the country. And I wondered what possible connection could there be between Islam, which is a religion, and science. So I approached the lecture skeptically. But on the night of the lecture, the Maulana left me with my mouth open wide in astonishment. He was absolutely brilliant, and I was astonished, and I subsequently tried as best as I could to attend every lecture of his that I could. And then came the farewell program. He's leaving the country, and there's a huge crowd attending this last lecture, and I'm standing way down at the back of the hall, no place to sit down. And at the end of his lecture, he said, I want 5 young men of this country to come forward to proceed to study Islam abroad. And I decided in my heart, I want to be one of those 5. And then he left. But the impact of his personality, the impact of his scholarship, his spirituality, all of them changed my life. It changed my life. It took me 3 years before I could go to Al-Azhar on a scholarship. But when I went to Al-Azhar University, I couldn't find that caliber of scholarship to which I was exposed at the age of 18. At 18, you're on the board. You're on the border now of being an adult scholar. So I'm not a little school, and I could recognize the value of his scholarship, and I couldn't find that scholarship at Al-Azhar.
Even at that time.
No. And I was about to leave Al-Azhar. My family were advising me, and I was choosing a career of law. And I was going to go to Britain and enroll in a school of law and study law, become a lawyer, because I have a natural ability for the law. Then he wrote to me from Pakistan. He says, I got this news, it's broken my heart. I'm establishing an Institute of Islamic Studies in Pakistan. We're not yet ready to start, but I'm writing to you to come. There were three of us. Zaid Ali Bazel, who is now passed away, Abdul Wahid Abdul Hamid, who is a distinguished, learned writer on Islam, living in Britain, and myself. So out of the three of us, Abdul Wahid says, no, thank you, I'm heading for England.
Okay.
So he went to England, and he did a master's degree in history, I think, the London School of Economics perhaps, and emerged as a very famous writer, writing school books, for example, for Islamic schools. And Zaid Ali Bazel and myself decided to accept his offer, and we left and went to Pakistan. When we arrived there, the institute had not yet started. We were the first students. It's the best decision I ever made in my life, to leave Al-Azhar University and to go to study with Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari in Pakistan. And the years that I spent studying with him in Pakistan, it very plainly and clearly established for me that this man was indeed my khidr. Yeah.
So now a little bit about critical thinking, Maulana. You always encourage your students to think critically, but now the academic world has almost exclusively claimed critical thinking for themselves. And in the secular universities, and especially the academic environment that Dajjal has created today, critical thinking is causing the young people, or this generation of people, to turn slowly away from Islam. So when you say critical thinking, could we say, are you speaking more about fiqh? And could you explain this thing called critical thinking?
The universities are lying. They're lying when they say they are their foundation is on critical thinking. Rather, it is not critical thinking, it is an insistence on conventional thinking. What the universities have done is to establish themselves as policemen of knowledge and of thought. And if you dare step out of line, they will come with a chopper to chop off your head. A student left Ghana to study at a university in Canada on a Canadian government scholarship. And he's advanced now, and he's reached his PhD. And he's writing his thesis and is about to submit his thesis. When I organized a seminar in Trinidad, in Tobago, and he wrote to me he's interested in attending the seminar. And they intercepted that email. And from the day they intercepted that email, finished. They then started putting roadblocks on his way, and eventually frustrated him, cut off his scholarship, and he had to return to Africa without being able to get his PhD. Is that critical thinking, or is that bogus thinking? They allow you to think, provided you think on the road that they determine you must think. Is that critical thinking? No. That's the university today. You have got to be careful now. If you say that it was the Israeli Mossad and the CIA who planned and executed 9/11, rather than some Osama bin Laden and some Afghan men hiding in some caves in Afghanistan, that's it. Your career is finished. You cannot proceed with your studies. You are not what they call a blacklist. I don't know why they don't like the color black. So that's not critical thinking. Critical thinking is something else. Critical thinking is possible only when the mind is free and there are no roadblocks. Once you have to stop on the road to knowledge because you're not allowed to proceed, you're now bogus. We cannot trust you. That's right. The one who is a critical thinker is the one who has absolute freedom to think, with nothing to stop him. So when I was saying goodbye to Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari to return to Trinidad in 1971, and he embraced me, I'm leaving for the airport, he put his hands out like this, said, Imran, when you go back to Trinidad, I want your hand to be like this, not like this. He said, I know the character of this ummah. In fact, he should have said, I know the character of the world today. So long as you are dependent on them for your livelihood, he who pays the piper calls the tune. And so there is no possibility for critical thinking unless you have an independent livelihood. That's right. And so I have over the years struggled, and it's been a long, long road for me to build myself up as a writer. And now, with the help of so many people, alhamdulillah, who helped me to pay the cost of printing my books. And because my books have some value in them, people can appreciate it. I'm not writing these books to become rich now. I am now able to earn my livelihood independently. As a consequence, you can't fire me. You can't fire me. I don't have to watch over my shoulder when I'm lecturing, because if this man is offended or that man is more offended, I lose my job, I won't get a promotion, I get this and that and the other. Critical thinking is possible only when there is freedom. And that is disappearing in the world today, freedom. Secondly, critical thinking requires a certain methodology for thought. I was outside the masjid, the salat was over, and Maulana Ansari was talking with someone. And I went and I stood very respectfully at a distance. He knew I'm there because I have a question to ask. So he waited for a while until in the conversation he could say, all right, Imran Mia, what is it? So I said to him, Maulana, Allah says in the Quran that ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This book is guidance only for those who are God-fearing. What about the rest of mankind? Doesn't it provide guidance for all of mankind? Only for the God-fearing? He said, Imran Mia, he says, there is that guidance which is consequential guidance. And there's that guidance which is only a nominal guidance. He says, for those who do not have the fear of Allah in their hearts, the guidance in the Quran is nominal guidance. But for those who have the fear of Allah in their hearts, the guidance in the Quran is consequential. They can change their lives and they can use it to change the world. And there's a world of difference between these and those. He looked up, he pointed to the sky. It was late afternoon. He says, there are millions of stars up there in the sky. For these people, they look up, they only see some pretty lights. They call it starlight. The night is beautiful, so many stars in the sky. That's all they see, the beauty. But this one, who has the fear of Allah in his heart, and for whom the Quran gives him guidance, the Quran points to the same stars, and the stars are there to guide you. وَبِالنَّجْمِ هُمْ يَهْتَدُونَ. And in order for the stars to guide you, you're out there in the middle of the ocean in a ship, and you need direction. You have to be able to read the stars. And you can only read the stars when you learn how they are connected with each other. Similarly, with all other branches of knowledge. It is the connection between the verses of the Quran, the connection with different branches of knowledge and so on. that you can then be able to connect the dots and understand the world and proceed with the pursuit of knowledge. That is part of the essence of critical thinking.
That brings us to the subject of methodology. You have always spoken about methodology. Now there is external knowledge, and you have explained something called internal intuitive insight. And there seems to be a methodology for both. And the secular education or the universities or whatever is acquired externally, including the Darul Ulum, they have designed a certain traditional way of teaching and acquiring that knowledge. Until today, they also speak about, especially in this region, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, they speak constantly about sanad. Where have you learned this book from? Which teacher have you learned this book from? Or how did you know this subject? Where is your sanad? In the same way, as far as internal knowledge is concerned, most of the Sufi spiritual groups in the world today speak of a silsila, that the student must go to a teacher who has a teacher, until it reaches the Prophet ﷺ. And is your silsila authentic? Now, I have heard you, Maulana, mention many times that the methodology for both has now changed because of the times that we are living in. Could you explain a little bit about this change, why this change, and how this has changed?
The methodology for the pursuit of knowledge externally acquired has not changed. It is that they were using a defective methodology. And Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari had to come forward in his book, The Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society, to correct that defect. Knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge in Islam requires that we recognize that absolute truth is located in the Quran. Only the Quran delivers absolute truth. All else beside the Quran is relative. Only the Quran is absolute. And hence it follows that the Quran must sit in judgment of knowledge located outside of the Quran. And so a hadith cannot have the same status as the Quran. If a hadith is in harmony with the Quran, then we close our eyes and accept it. But what do we do when we find a hadith which is in conflict with the Quran? This is where Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari has made his mark in correcting defects in the methodology. That Nabi Muhammad bin A'udhu Billah married a child. He married a child. And the hadith is in Sahih Bukhari, it is Sahih Muslim, it's all the books. That Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha was 6 years of age when the marriage took place. And she was 9 when the marriage was consummated. Well, we're not concerned with the date of consummation. We're concerned with the date of marriage. And this hadith is in manifest violation. It is in violent conflict with the Quran, where the Quran insists that you cannot marry a girl until she's reached the age of puberty. When she's reached the age of puberty, now she can become a mother. Only now she's a woman, and marriage is always a nisa. And the Quran says, "Nisa'ukum harsul lakum fa'tu harsakum anna shi'tum." That they are your fields that you plow and you plant the seed. And if Allah so wills, the seed can germinate and the baby can be born. But a girl prior to the age of puberty does not qualify as a field that can be plowed for planting a seed. It's elementary. So how can you marry a girl? And that is, this hadith is in violent conflict with the Quran. And Maulana Ansari did not use this language that I am using. In his age, it was very dangerous. In this age, I don't care two peanuts what they think about me. No. So he simply used this term. She must have been about 17 years of age. That's what he said. And because his language was very guarded, they didn't cut off his head for that. But they want to cut off my head, go ahead. The truth will still survive. You can kill a man, you cannot kill the truth. So Maulana Ansari corrected defects in the methodology of the Darul Uloom. The Darul Uloom says that ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها. That the verses of the Quran which have been cancelled and no longer in the Quran, they've disappeared from the Quran and so on, or they're there in the Quran but no longer have operational validity. And Maulana Ansari said, no, they're wrong. No verse of the Quran has been cancelled or abrogated. None. Every single verse of the Quran still remains with an operational validity. And here he parted company with the entire world of Islamic scholarship. It didn't bother him. He parted company. He didn't publicize his views. For the pursuit of knowledge in Akhir Zaman is different. The Quran is comprised of two kinds of verses. You have the ayat muhkamat and you have the ayat mutashabihat. And ayat mutashabihat cannot be interpreted without knowledge coming directly from Allah. And Allah will choose to send that knowledge when He chooses to. And it is in this time, Akhirul Zaman, that He sends the knowledge that we need to interpret the ayat mutashabihat. So if you're stuck with only ayat muhkamat and you're incapable of interpreting ayat mutashabihat, what is the value of your methodology in Akhir Zaman? So many verses of the Quran which need to be interpreted to be able to understand the dunya today. وَأَلْقَيْنَا عَلَى كُرْسِهِ جَسَدٍ. They could not in the previous age recognize that Jasad was Dajjal. Yes. But in this age Allah sends down the knowledge and we're able to interpret that the Jasad is Dajjal. The world of Islamic scholarship now turns violently towards you. What is this man? Where did this knowledge come from? We never had this knowledge before. They are incapable of assimilating new knowledge in Akhir Zaman because they do not accept interpretation of ayat of the Quran and hadith which they never heard before, like the mountain of gold coming out underneath the river.
Okay, so Maulana, this as you have mentioned, can we call this Ta'wilul Ahadith as mentioned in Surah Yusuf 3 times? Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam said, or Allah said, وَكَذَلِكَ يَجْتَبِيكَ رَبُّكَ وَيُعَلِّمُكَ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. And also Yusuf alayhi salam said, رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. That spirituality today, or looking for such a man to learn from, must be able to interpret events or do ta'wilul ahadith.
The ta'wilul ahadith allowed him to be able to interpret dreams and interpret visions, and he did it. The ta'wilul ahadith also allows us to connect the dots of history and to interpret events unfolding in the world. I missed the bus. I could not connect the dots. And I could not therefore read and understand the role of the Soviet Union in history. All these years, only now I'm able to recognize that the Soviet Union played a critically important role in preparing Russia to stand up today against the West. I could not understand the role of Mao Zedong in history, the communist China. Now I recognize that Mao Zedong and his communist revolution in China played a critically important role in building China to the stage where today it can stand up and defy the West. You see? So the ta'wil hadith is the internal knowledge with which we're able to understand and connect the dots and interpret events. It's not meant to perform miracles and so on. Ta'wil al-hadith also, of course, is for interpreting dreams. I have not been blessed with that knowledge for interpreting dreams, and maybe Allah in His wisdom knows why He has not given me that knowledge.
On the other hand, on paper money, Maulana, could we say that paper money today is the litmus test to identify whether a scholar of Islam is, whether we are ready to learn from this scholar of Islam, to identify this man who understands the age? Because if the man knows the world today, he must be able to identify the nature of this money that we use.
The world of Islamic scholarship, which does not as yet recognize paper money and plastic money, what they call fiat money, and cryptocurrencies and so on, to be bogus and fraudulent and haram. That is a world of Islamic scholarship which cannot provide guidance for us in respect of how to respond to the challenges of the modern age. Meaning the challenges which has come from modern Western civilization. They have no qualifications to do that. But that does not mean that they are devoid of value. Such scholarship has its role to play. There are many other subjects they can teach, which are independent upon the emergence of modern Western civilization. We do not write off those scholars of Islam. They have a role to play. They can teach you how to perform salat. I wish they would also teach people how to perform wudu. But that world of Islamic scholarship has no credentials whatsoever in guiding people in respect of the modern age. Whether or not you're allowed to vote in elections of the modern secular state, they should keep silent because they have no credentials to answer that question.
Lastly, Maulana, one question on the role of Quran recitation. You have encouraged us to read Quran regularly, and you also mentioned that you went to Geneva with the Quran in your heart. Now, what is happening in the spiritual circles of the Muslim community, the Muslim world, is that the Syeikh is giving the student something like doses of Quran recitation, as if he's giving cures for the ailments of the heart. So they have only reserved the recitation of the Quran as if it is shifa for the person's diseases of the heart. I have heard some sheikhs also discourage the students from reciting the Quran. They have said, this is not for you at this stage, you will not be able to understand the meanings or grasp the meanings now. And they have said, okay, maybe a few pages a day is enough for you. So how do we look at these kind of teachers, Maulana, if we are to, you have encouraged us so forcefully to take it up as a habit, but then in the world of Islamic scholarship, we don't really find that, especially in the spiritual circles.
Allah says about the Quran that He sent it لِقَوْمِ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. He sent it to people who think. He never said He sent it to the ulama. Every single believer has been endowed with the capacity to think. Everyone. And if we fail to think, we pay the price. And so the Quran has to be studied. The first statement declared in the Quran is that it is huda, guidance. And in order to locate the guidance in the Quran, you got to study the book. I have argued that no one can study the book unless you're reciting the book. And that's why the book itself is named Book of Recitation, Quran, Book of Recitation. Reading is done with the eyes. But Allah has said, لَا تُحَرِّكْ بِهِ لِسَانَكَ لِتَعْجَلَ بِهِ. So recitation is done with the tongue, The tongue must move in order for you to recite the book. وَإِذَا قَرَأْنَاهُ فَاتَّبِعْ قُرْآنَهُ. And when we have recited the book, meaning when Jibreel alayhi salam has conveyed to you our method of recitation of the book, you must follow that method of recitation. Okay? So we are advised, we are encouraged, we are ordered to recite the Quran. In Akhir Zaman, if we neglect the recitation of the Quran as it ought to be recited, which is once a month, cover to cover, if we neglect that, number one, we will never be able to study the Quran, because the Quran describes itself as ruh. It's a ruh from Allah. And as a ruh from Allah, it's a living thing. The Quran knows if you are reciting the Quran or not. The Quran knows if you're neglecting the Quran. The Quran knows if you're reciting the Quran only mechanically. Okay? The Quran knows if you're reciting the Quran with no understanding. All of these things the Quran knows. So you've got to recite the Quran if you're able to, if you want to study the Quran. And the recitation of the Quran eventually must be with understanding of what is in the Quran. But there's a second reason why we need to recite the Quran in Akhir Zaman. This is the age of the greatest danger of all. They are subjected to danger of all kinds. The danger of attacks from Dajjal, the danger of attacks from Gog and Magog, the danger of what Dabbatul Al can do to us. And how do we respond? Amongst the dangers of Akhir Zaman is the time will move faster and faster. A whole year will pass like a month, a whole month like a week. If you have the perception that time is moving faster and faster, the implication is that Dajjal has you in his embrace. You've got to slow down. And it is the Quran, the recitation of the Quran with the moon that will help you to slow down. But the Quran has yet another function to perform in Akhir Zaman, saving you from the embrace of Dajjal. وَإِذَا قَرَأْتَ الْقُرْآنَ جَعَلْنَا بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ حِجَابًا مَسْتُورًا. Allah, when you recite the Quran as it ought to be recited, Allah will place a hijab to separate you from those who are wicked and who want to damage you and attack you. And that hijab, I can translate it as a covering, and they say it's invisible hijab. But the Quran, which is a ruh from Allah, performs this miraculous function of protecting us from dangers in Akhir Zaman. This is what they do not understand when they said to the people, you don't have to recite the Quran.
So Musa alayhi salam actually undertook a long journey to physically go and be in the company of Khidr alayhi salam. So can we say, Maulana, that it is a requirement to keep physical company with the teacher? If someone identifies someone as the Khidr, or someone he can acquire this knowledge from, does he have to physically accompany him?
The purpose of his going in search of the teacher was not to be able to shake his hands or to embrace him or to look at his face and hear his voice, but rather to acquire the knowledge that Allah had given to him. And so as we search for our Khidr in this age, if it is possible for us to get the knowledge, without having to travel to meet with him. That will fulfill the objective of acquiring knowledge. Today, the knowledge is available. You can get books. The books are available. The books are cheap. Instead of going and buying a Kentucky Fried Chicken, a box of Kentucky Fried Chicken, the same amount of money can be used to buy a book. And with the books you can get knowledge. Every home should have a library of books. My father, may Allah have mercy on him, spent his money on books. And I was only 12 years of age. My father was still alive, but he did not know. He did not know. Up to this day, he did not know that I was downstairs in his library and I was reading books on Islamic philosophy at the age of 12. At the age of 12, 13, 14, my brothers and sisters, none of them looked at those books which were there in the library. None. But I went and I found those books and I started reading them at 12, 13, 14. So I already had an introduction to Islamic philosophy and Islamic history from good writers. He chose good books. And so if you can acquire the knowledge from books, you don't have to go to meet the Khidr. If you can go on the internet, so I don't know how long the internet will last, and you are able to listen to the lectures, that is just as good. If you're able to read the books, you can download the books from the internet, that's just as good. If you're able to travel to meet your teacher, then of course the impact of his personality is also important. The impact of the personality of Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari upon me made a great significant thing in my life, yes.
Okay, thank you, Maulana, for the interview, even though it was a bit noisy outside.
Yes, well, I am grateful for this opportunity, and I want to thank Tawfiq Center for the invitations that they've been extending to me to lecture at the center, and pray that Allah might bless them, and Hasbullah as well, that Allah may bless you to one day become a scholar that the world of Islam will be proud, inshallah.
Thank you.